What up, fight world? It's your boy Ego, and I'm back with some more boxing. Now, I want to get my post-fight thoughts to Bernard Hopkins' final fight with Joe Smith Jr. I had to go get something to eat. You guys don't know what I be doing for this boxing community. Sometimes I just, like when it's a fight night and there's a ton of fights, I'm just pumping out videos, working on the website, doing all this stuff, and I don't even have time to eat. So I put out a quick video, and now here's my actual, the realest Bernard Hopkins versus Joe Smith Jr. commentary. Now, this is my thoughts. Boxing Ego. This is not HBO. This is not anybody else. If you want that, then go to those channels, go to HBO or whatever. But this is my thoughts, and I'm going to break it down and give you guys that real like I always do. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Now, the bad and ugly is pretty obvious. Bernard Hopkins, this was his final fight. They billed it as the final one or something like that, and he got knocked out. Point blank, period. He got knocked out. So that's not how you want to go out. Me personally, I'm glad I didn't go to this fight. I mean, even though I live in California, some of y'all don't realize how big California is. I'm in the Bay Area. If I drive to California or to Southern California, like Inglewood, especially, like I'd have to leave at the right time and it'll take about 6 hours, right? Or catch a flight or whatever. But I don't know. It just, to me, it wasn't that type of car where like I had to see it live and had to be there. Like there's just so much happening. I mean, it would have been cool, part of Bhop's history, but I don't know. There's so many other fights and stuff I got to plan for. It just wasn't in the forecast. Undercard didn't really do it for me. The Usyk fight, I don't think it was, I mean, it was okay. Jojo Diaz, that fight was decent. You know what I mean? It just, I don't know. I wasn't just wowed by it, like, whoa, wow. You know what I'm saying? Some fights and fight cards you have to be there for. Like Ward Kovalev, the main event. Oh my, I mean, that's just one I'm happy that I got to go see live. Now, main event, Bernard Hopkins. I didn't do an actual prediction on this particular fight, but I knew this was a potential just because he's battling father time each and every time. And it's not like Sergio Martinez or Marquez, who are like 40, or even Floyd, 37 to 41 years old. I mean, this dude is 10, 11 years older than them, and he's still competing. And it was a dangerous fight. Again, I didn't do a prediction, but I warned people on my Boxing Ego first look for this fight. I told you guys, Bhop, he's 51, he'll be 52 in January, right? So it's not like he just turned 51 in November or something. He's gonna be 52, so he has age going against him. You have Joe Smith Jr., who's on a tear from the Fonfara fight. Impressive first round knockout. The guy, I mean, just at the press conference and stuff, you could tell he's big. Even though they're in the same division and about the same height, Joe Smith Jr., he's just younger and he looks bigger and stronger, stuff like that. So it was always an uphill battle. But more importantly, what I told you guys in the first look is Bernard Hopkins, he last fought against Kovalev, right? Kovalev has probably had 3 or 4 fights since then. I don't know off the top of my head without, you know what I mean, looking at the calendar, but I know he's fought a couple times. He fought Andre Ward, he fought Isaac Chilemba. The Muhammadi fight was probably after Pascal. You know what I mean? That's like 4 fights since the Hopkins fight. Bernard Hopkins has fought Goose Egg since the Kovalev fight. And then he's trying to go up against a big puncher with youth on his side, things like that. It's just an uphill battle. 2-year layoff. It's different being in there and actually competing versus being older and taking 2 years on the sidelines where you're promoting and at the fights with Golden Boy, and then all of a sudden you're just trying to lace them up. So clearly, to me, I'm not making excuses. I'm just telling you what it is. And I said this before the fight. Bhop bit off more than he could chew. He didn't really plan this one out. And a credit to Joe Smith Jr. In addition, it still takes a certain level of talent to pull it off. And I think maybe Bernard Hopkins perhaps underestimated Joe Smith Jr., thinking he's like more of a Tavoris Cloud type, because that was pretty much easy work for him. That was another big puncher at the time. But maybe he thought, oh, with my age, I can keep getting away with this. And it just, Joe Smith Jr. pulled his card, and he wasn't having it. He was hungry. I'm going to break down some of his strengths and weaknesses too in this video, but he just had other plans, and Smith was probably underestimated by Bernard Hopkins. and that wasn't a good choice by Bernard Hopkins. And then another thing I said in the first look, which is I think played a big part. 2-year layoff is long, especially if you're age 51, about to be 52. But more importantly, you got to look at, this is what I do when I'm doing my predictions, just to give you guys a little tip. I said this in the first look. Hopkins took a lot of punishment versus Kovalev. So the timing was all bad for Hopkins. You know what I'm saying? Like from the opening bell, Kovalev hurt Hopkins in the first round. Then he seemed kind of gun shy ever since that moment where he was doing little things, but he wasn't really going for broke. And in that 12th round, he was really getting melted. And you know what I'm saying? It looked like he was about to get stopped by Kovalev. We see how good of a boxer Kovalev is because he just gave Andre Ward one of his toughest fights, right? So Kovalev, what he did to Bernard Hopkins, to me, was worse than what he did to Ward, because Hopkins absorbed all the punishment and all these flush shots. Because I remember after, I was like, wow, Bernard Hopkins got a hell of a chin. And it's a compliment, but that's also not a good thing. It's a compliment like, damn, you got a crazy chin, but it's bad because that also means you had to show it. You had to eat a lot of flush shots for me to know you have a good chin. You know what I'm saying? You could say like, it's not good to rely on your chin and that to hold up in boxing. Look at Robert Guerrero. You could be like, oh, he has a man-style chin in his fight with Keith Thurman, but then his very next fight, he came back too soon, and he got dropped by a guy with 4 knockouts in Aaron Martinez, right? He just got beat by David Peralta, lost to Danny Garcia. You know what I mean? He hasn't really looked the same since the Thurman fight. So sometimes it's worse to take a sustained beating. You look at Bermane Stiverne. He went 12 rounds with the heavy-handed Deontay Wilder. He ate those shots, and he didn't really officially get knocked down, even though I think there was one point where he tackled Wilder, and that should have been a knockdown. But officially, he didn't get knocked down, and he ate a lot of shots from Wilder. But he came back, and he got knocked down by like a nobody in his next fight after that. You know what I'm saying? So the fact that Hopkins took that much punishment from Kovalev, and I'm not taking anything away from Joe Smith Jr., this is just really how I look at boxing, plus the 2-year layoff, plus age, just all spelled trouble for Bernard Hopkins. You know what I'm saying? Because let's say after he beat Shumanov, he took 2 years off and then fought Joe Smith Jr. That would be better than taking 2 years off of a bad Kovalev beating and then fighting another puncher. You know what I'm saying? Maybe a puncher is not as good as Kovalev, but that's the thing. When your skills start to deteriorate and you slow down, it doesn't matter. Like, you know what I'm saying? Certain things become enough for a fighter. So what I mean by this is, in terms of being enough, is Joe Smith Jr., he has some flaws in there. I definitely seen flaws that maybe even a prime Bernard Hopkins would be able to pick out and pick apart. Now, again, I'm not making excuses. I'm just really going off of what I've seen from both fighters, right? I don't care who won. You know, I don't have a horse in the race. You know what I'm saying? It makes more sense that Joe Smith Jr. won anyway, just because he's younger and he's the guy that's going to continue his career. So he can fight better Biev or Andre Ward, or Sullivan Barrera just came off a good win, Shabransky, all these guys. So, you know what I mean? It actually makes more sense. As opposed to if Bhop won, he said he was retiring anyway. You know what I'm saying? I'm just being real. And this, I mean, that's the part about seeing the legends go out. It sucks to see them go out like this, but they never learn. You know what I'm saying? And they're grown men. You can't tell them how to live their life, and maybe they have something to prove to themselves, or the competitive nature. They always want to risk it, and they're always like teetering on the edge of defeat. You know what I'm saying? Battling Father Time, like Roy Jones, my favorite of all time, kept doing it. Mike Tyson, you know what I mean? It sucks to see guys, you know, the people, Peter McNeely, all these people Tyson lost to late in his career. Come on, like, you know, a focused prime Mike Tyson. Do you really think they would beat him? Same thing with Roy Jones. You think Enzo Macaroni or Macarena, whatever his name is, Machiavelli, whatever his name is, do you think that he really would have beat Roy Jones when Roy Jones went up to heavyweight and beat a heavyweight? You know what I'm saying? You think a cruiserweight like Enzo Macarelli is going to beat prime Roy Jones? Or even fights where it could have went other ways, like prime Eric Morales, would he have lost to Danny Garcia and got knocked out in the rematch? Who knows? You know what I'm saying? So I could think of time and time again, but that's why boxing has to be respected. It's a brutal sport. You know what I mean? And I think Bernard Hopkins maybe thought he picked out the right person for him because he kept saying, oh, he's common, special, common, I'm special. So maybe he thought he was so common that he could do what he did and kind of forget the rules of the game. And the rules of the game are like, you don't just take long breaks with no tune-up. You don't fight when you're 50 plus years old. And like I said, the timing couldn't have been worse for Bernard Hopkins. Even if he did, at least take a tune-up or like, you know what I mean, build yourself back up to it. I wouldn't recommend that to anyone. Like, let's say Pacquiao or Floyd Mayweather. If there's a welterweight out there who's been out of the ring for 2 years and in their last fight, they nearly got stopped, would you suggest that they come back and fight Floyd or Pacquiao or even a Keith Thurman? You know what I mean? Somebody who's on top? No, it wouldn't make sense. You know what I mean? So the fact that Bernard Hopkins thought he could do that, I mean, it was just the writing was potentially on the wall unless he could just, I mean, and that's why we watch it, just to see if he can pull a rabbit out of the hat. But Joe Smith Jr. did do some good things in there, and I'm not taking away from his win. Actually, like I said, it helped shape the division that he won. What I did like from Joe Smith Jr. is Bernard Hopkins plays a lot of mind games. He didn't fall for none of them. So, you know what I mean, that tough New York minute, New Yorker mentality, I like that from Joe Smith Jr. Because boxing, a lot of people do the psychological warfare, and he was never really intimidated. And that's another thing why, like, Kovalev beat Bernard Hopkins, and I predicted that one. I actually have a prediction video on YouTube right now. Said Kovalev not by knockout, but by decision. And that's exactly what happened. But guys that are built tough like Kovalev and Joe Smith Jr., they don't fall for the mind games. That's good. That's a good thing to have as a fighter. Some people, the moment gets too big, you know what I mean? You're fighting a Hall of Famer who's done this time and time again, embarrassed Kelly Pavliks and young guys and Tavoris Cloud. You know what I'm saying? So the fact that Joe Smith Jr., that shows me a little bit about his mental, that he didn't fall for like the Bernard Hopkins psychological warfare. So I like that. I like his body attack. I didn't know he was as good of a body puncher. Sometimes power punchers headhunt. And the fact that he went to Bernard Hopkins' body made a whole hell of a lot of sense to me, because the man's pushing 52. That's what you want to do. He moves and stuff like that. Slow him down to the body. So that's the proper execution and game plan to me. And just his power showed up. Now, as far as his weaknesses, he needs to work on cutting off the ring because he was following at spots. And like I said, a more polished in prime Bernard Hopkins, not out of a long layoff, probably could have capitalized on that a little bit more. As you get older, your reflexes slow, your testosterone levels drop, things like that. And that's what it looked like to me. Like for Bernard Hopkins, he clearly looked different than the Hopkins that just fought Tavoris Cloud a couple years ago, right? He just looked, even though he was like still conservative, economical with his punches, he looked slow to me. Like he looked a lot slower. You could look at his physical body, and like the executioner when he fought Roy Jones and when he was in his 20s or 30s or whatever after prison, he was more chiseled. But you looked at it as body, it's not a bad body. It's not like if he was at a beach, you'd be like, oh, look at that body. He's morbidly obese or out of shape, but it's still not his prime form. He looked a little bit softer. You know what I'm saying? He wasn't as chiseled as, I mean, I've watched the man's whole career. So, I mean, anyone who says he's more in shape, it is retarded. You know what I mean? And again, it's hard as you get older. Once you get to a certain age, it's hard to, your skin loses elasticity and stuff. You know what I mean? It's hard to, like, the only people that really do it are people who are like super on point with their diet and organic eating and stuff like that, or people who often use supplements, like illegal supplement, like Stallone. You know what I mean? I don't know about early in his career, but when he was filming Rambo and Rocky 19 and shit, he was clearly using stuff because he was like, I mean, you could tell. He got caught for it too. Like filming Rambo, I think he got caught for having like HGH or something. And it was apparent because he was like old and super vascular still and stuff like that. You know what I mean? And your body that's like defying the law of time and stuff. But Bernard Hopkins, he looked like he lost a pace. He looked more his age than I've ever seen, and I attribute that to taking a lot of punishment in the Kovalev fight, long layoff, things like that. And I mean, it happens. And I think he thought he was gonna go in there and do what he's always done and just dog the younger, bigger, stronger guy. But it's different when you're in there. And you know what I mean? Before, like the Tavoris Cloud fight, another big puncher. Bhop beat him before, like Adonis Stevenson and stuff. But he hadn't had a recent loss that I know of where he endured the punishment that he endured in the Kovalev fight. That plays a huge part. Not and maybe even on your psyche in terms of confidence. Kovalev was melting him in that 12th round. So that's kind of what I seen from this particular fight. You had an aging fighter, and then the younger guy did what he was supposed to do. But I did see some flaws with Joe Smith Jr. Cutting off the ring is one of them. He followed, and even though he was able to get the knockout, the pace kept going more and more towards the Bernard Hopkins pace, and he should have. It's weird fighting guys like Hopkins. You got to be like in the perfect middle usually. You know what I mean? You don't want to overly, like, how do you say it? In the first round, I thought throughout the fight, I thought he was kind of wild and kind of sloppy with his punches. Especially in the first round, he was just like trying to pile it on and hurt Bernard Hopkins. And again, had it been more of a in prime Bernard Hopkins, that would have made him pay even more. You know what I'm saying? For those moments, because guys like Bernard Hopkins or Money Mayweather, as he evolved, that suits them well when people get overly aggressive because they can pick their shots. But it just so happens a combination of long layoff, Bhop being 51 years old, he wasn't able to get it in like he normally does. Pause. Like his reflexes seem slowed down a touch. I mean, and that's honestly what I seen. But Joe Smith Jr., he stuck to a game plan, listened to his corner, and he got the job done. People were asking me if I thought it was a push. Absolutely not. I think that's Bernard Hopkins politicking, trying to create like some mystique and controversy, but it was all leather from what I've seen. Joe Smith Jr. had probably 3 or 4 really good punches. Bernard Hopkins was clearly hurt. I don't know if he was knocked out per se. I think he might have blacked out, but I don't know, because if he did get knocked out, like physically knocked out, and it was hard to tell, it was like really quick and he recovered pretty fast, because he was like, oh, he pushed me, and he got up, or he was like, you could see his eyes open and he was talking and responsive. So I don't know if he was just hurt or if he actually blanked out or blacked out. It looked like he could have actually like blacked out, but the reason I know that it was Bernard Hopkins kind of trying to play sides and, I don't know, maybe get a no contest or DQ is, one, he's done that before. If you watched the Chad Dawson fight, Chad Dawson was like, man, like he was pissed off because he did something that was illegal. He threw Bernard Hopkins down and tackled him, and then Bernard Hopkins claimed injury. But that was a fight where Chad Dawson, who's a hell of a boxer and tall and stuff like that, was giving Hopkins problems. So it kind of looked like a way out for Hopkins. Like, oh, I'm older, and let me just use this and say I got hurt. And you've seen that kind of show up in this fight, because they were like, it was some confusion in the ring, and they were like, oh, is your ankle? And he was like, yeah, I could walk on it. And they're like, all right, get back in the ring. And he was like, no, I can't walk. I mean, I could walk on it, but I can't stand on it. You know what I'm saying? So it sounded like they were going to give him another opportunity to get back in the ring and continue the fight. But it seemed like he was making an excuse or a reason as to why it couldn't. So he was content. He knew he was being overpowered or he was hurt or whatever. So he was content using the injury to have it end in that way. You know what I'm saying? Because if he wasn't really hurt, then he would have just got back up in the ring and be like, okay, let's go. Let's continue. Because it sounded like they were giving him the opportunity to. But it is what it is. He probably underestimated Joe Smith Jr. Another reason I don't think it was a push, aside from my own 2 eyes and instant replay, is his body was lifeless. His ankles were in the air. So that's why I think he might have been temporarily disconnected, because you're not going to let somebody, you're going to grab a hold of him. If you have your wits about you, you're not going to let someone hit you with a succession of 3 or 4 shots without trying to grab them or anything, and just let your body lifelessly fly out. Like, you know what I'm saying? That, I don't know if you guys ever remember the movie Last Action Hero. They had that Jack the Ripper guy, and I think it was Arnold Schwarzenegger. What are you doing? His son or some shit was on the roof, and then the bad guy, like, I don't know if he pushed him or something, and the kid was like, hey, and it just fell off the roof, and Arnold got to see his son die or something crazy like that. And that's how Bernard Hopkins fell out. Like, he fell out like a doll or some shit, you know what I'm saying? And it didn't look like he had any control over his body. So that's why I think he might have been actually temporarily knocked out, because that was just weird and bizarre to see him fly out of the ring like that. If he was awake, because you would at least try to grab the ropes or something, or Joe Smith Jr. You're not going to just fly out of the thing, like, you know what I'm saying? Like you're skydiving. So just a weird ending. I felt bad for Bernard Hopkins. Obviously, it's his final fight to go out like that. And I also felt bad for Joe Smith Jr. because this was his opportunity. And if it had ended within the ropes, like the conventional way, like when he beat Andres Fanfara, then there would be no disputing it. But the fact that Bernard Hopkins protested and kind of was awake and then pleaded his case, it kind of added a cloud of quote unquote doubt. I don't really doubt it, but you know what I mean, other people were booing him, Joe Smith Jr. and stuff. So it made it end in an unconventional, funky way. And I felt bad for Joe Smith Jr. because it kind of robbed him of his time to shine and get the torch passed to him, because it didn't, you know what I mean? Like Danny Garcia, he knocked out Eric Morales in the rematch based on the rematch clause. There's no disputing it. Morales just got spun the fuck around. You know what I'm saying? Like James Brown. So there's no disputing it. But with this, Bernard Hopkins was, you know what I mean, doing his usual pleading and protesting. And it kind of robbed Joe Smith Jr. of his opportunity. Because I could tell, I'm pretty good with reading people and stuff. And he was happy, but I know he had to hold back. He couldn't express himself the way he wanted, because it fell the way the Bernard Hopkins fell and the way it ended. It felt like Joe Smith had to hold back. Like, oh, I was in there with the legend, and he would have tried to get back up if he could, but I know he couldn't celebrate like he wanted to. I just can read it on Joe Smith Jr.'s face. But this goes to show you guys the dangers of this sport. Sport of boxing is crucial. You got to be ready, and you know what I mean. It's a young man's sport. It's not really for older fighters. Like, it hurt my heart to see Sergio Martinez versus Cotto too. I was confident. I mean, obviously I didn't know how bad Sergio's knee was, but I was confident he was going to beat Cotto. And I like Cotto, but I didn't see it going that way. And he was just getting melted by Cotto in the first round. So I'm like, oh my gosh. And then seeing this like with Hopkins, it's sad. You know what I mean? You don't want to see people, guys you grew up watching or guys you watched their whole career and stuff, and them go out like this. You'd rather, you know what I mean? Bernard Hopkins was gone for 2 years from outside of the ring. He could have continued doing that. And now he has this on his resume. He has like an actual loss where he got knocked out, which has never been done. You know what I'm saying? So it's that same Shane Mosley, another person. Anthony Mundine technically knocked him out. You know what I mean? Shane ain't never been knocked out by Vernon Forrest, and Mosley never got knocked out by Pacquiao and Floyd and all these other people. But then Anthony Mundine knocks him out. You know what I'm saying? I just don't like to see the legends go out like that. But they put themselves in this position by continuing to fight and to fight on and not know when to quit and then hang them up. But Bernard's a true soldier and a true warrior for at least challenging himself. You can't take that away from him. He's been the underdog versus Kelly Pavlik and fought guys much bigger and younger and stronger. He might have been the underdog versus De La Hoya and fights like that. So, I mean, he's a legend. He's fighting Kovalev, Joe Smith Jr. We can't even get people in their own divisions to fight the top guys in their own division. And yet you got a 51-year-old, about to be 52-year-old, willing to scrap and catch the fade with anybody. I mean, despite the outcome, you got to respect that. And lastly, I got to talk about HBO's commentary for the Hopkins-Smith fight. It's starting to get bad, y'all. It's starting to become deplorable. It's usually at least one person on the panel who's on some far out-ish. And it's just like, where is this coming from? Jim Lampley wasn't too bad, maybe because B-Hop's a sometime colleague. Roy Jones is always on point to me. Max Kellerman didn't really say anything that bad. This time it was Harold Letterman. And the stuff that they say on HBO is asinine sometimes from a commentary perspective. Like, they'll say complete contradictions just right there in front of the fans. Like, just eat this contradiction. Oh well. Like, Harold Letterman said something to the effect of Bernard Hopkins is in there with a puncher who he's seen many a times, and he comes to hurt you. He has bad intentions on every punch. He's younger, stronger than B-Hop, yada, yada, yada. He's a power puncher. He can get guys out of there, things of that sort, right? And then in the same situation, or in the same stanza, he says Bernard Hopkins is running from Joe Smith Jr. So it's like, you get your old ass in there. What do you expect Bernard Hopkins to do? Like, everything, using movement is not running. You know what I'm saying? And Bernard Hopkins looked very slow to me, so he definitely wasn't running. He was like doing this little trot to cover ground in real estate with his lateral movement. And they even said it in the commentary, it said baby steps. So he wasn't moving. He wasn't running. He was using movement. But again, it's a contradiction, and it sounds asinine to say this guy is this menacing puncher, but you're faulting the other person for running and using movement. Like, you expect a 51-year-old about to be 52-year-old to stand his ground for the entire fight, sitting in the pocket and trade with a guy whose arms look longer than his, who looks bigger than him mass-wise, and younger and stronger? That's retarded. Like, I want to see Harold Letterman get in there with Chocolatito or somebody and see how he stands his ground. You know what I'm saying? It just doesn't make sense from an HBO. You got to have more respect for the sport than to say these types of things. You know what I mean? Bernard Hopkins was doing what he felt and what benefited him. You know what I mean? That's the art of war. And it's getting to the point where HBO commentary is like, if you ain't slugging, then you ain't getting no love. You know what I mean? Carlos Cuadras, I thought, fought a good fight against Roman Chocolatito. They weren't calling none of the good shit he was doing. It was like Chocolatito show. So HBO, they're slowly but surely, constantly force feeding this narrative that the only terms of excitement are aggressive, like power punching knockout artists or guys who are aggressive. Then they get Jojo Diaz or like Lomachenko, good boxers, not the most powerful guys, but good boxers. And they always find ways to critique, or not critique, but give them praise for boxing. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, Lomachenko, he's using angles. But when Rigondeaux used angles, he was boring. On this telecast, Jojo Diaz, they were saying he's not the most powerful guy, but he was boxing. And they were making it their point to let you know that he's a boxer, but he likes to fight. He likes to fight. You know, man, bottom line is this. These fighters do what they can do based on who they're in there with and based on their teachings, whatever their style is. Point blank, period. You put Jojo Diaz in there with somebody who's hitting like Kovalev in his division, and you might see a different type of fight. You know what I'm saying? You put him in there with somebody who's not that heard of, then you might see a different. So that's bottom line what it is. Like, I've heard people say like, oh, Pacquiao and Marquez were wars because Marquez likes getting hit. Motherfucker don't like getting hit. Then why is he? What is the point? Why don't you just let Pacquiao just continually hit you with that straight left? It's not about liking getting hit. That's his style. He doesn't have the finesse and the upper body movement and athleticism of a Floyd Mayweather. So by nature, he's gonna get hit more. It's very easy. You know what I mean? And I'm getting sick of HBO's commentary about the same stuff. Like, if you fight like Golovkin, that's great. I love fights that are aggressive, but there's more to boxing than just one style and promoting one style. Like, you know what I'm saying? Letterman's cards are getting more and more like one-sided. Like, I don't even have to watch any of the fight, but if you tell me who is the aggressor, no matter, like, I thought Joe Smith Jr., some of his work was sloppy. Point blank, period. But no matter what, Letterman's going to give him the cards. Even on rounds where Bernard Hopkins, like 4 and 5, was doing better, in 3, which was kind of a swing round. And even if you edged it to Joe Smith Jr., the way Letterman's scoring now is just like he's not even watching. He's just going off of the bigger puncher, and that, to me, that's stupid. Of course, Kovalev beat Ward in your eyes if that's all you're looking for, who land the bigger, more thudding shots and shit like that. Let me know what you guys think. That is my full, the realist breakdown. Bernard Hopkins, Joe Smith Jr. did what Sergey Kovalev couldn't do. And, I mean, you might have to chalk some of that up to Kovalev beating and a long layoff and an older Bernard, but it is what it is. Congrats to Joe Smith Jr. Drop it in the comment section. Make sure you share the video. Like the video as always. Hate, comment, and subscribe. Till next video is Ego signing off. So if you enjoyed this video and want more content like this on the channel, you can show your appreciation by going to the PayPal donate button or the YouTube support button. And you can donate any amount that you feel is equivalent to the value of this video. Much more to come. Thank you guys for your support. Boxing Ego, the future of boxing.